We are here because we know the outcomes in our lives are within our control. That taking absolute ownership of how we eat, sleep, train, think, and connect with each other is how we'll optimize our health and happiness. That chasing excellence is how we grab hold of what is possible. Our mission is to live on the run, always chasing, never stopping. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Chasing Excellence. As always, here with Ben. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great, Patrick.
Excellent. Good. We're going to dive into I've mentioned this before, but I'll do it again because it's appropriate here, where sometimes you just send me a note and you just like, without any context, you just give me a one sentence or half sentence text. And this time we're diving back into one of those, and you sent me this: 2 elements of every successful business. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the 2 elements of every successful business. So obvious question first, what are the 2 elements?
2 elements are leadership and product. And each of those are made up of a few different pieces.
Okay, let's dive into leadership first. And I'll ask one question first, which is how much of this is relevant to the new book you guys just put out? Is this, leadership feels very much, is very much part of what that book is. Is that where this came from? This idea came from?
So this is a note I've been keeping in my phone for a long time about these 2 different elements and kind of like building things out behind each one of them. I'm always trying to think about the framework of things. So, I love pyramids and hourglasses and pie charts and graphs and
5 factors and 10 principles and
exactly anything, alliterations and acronyms and
I don't know if I've become like that because of you or if we just happen to both be the same, but I'm right there with you.
Yeah. So anything you grab a whiteboard and get excited about and be like, oh, check this out, and like try to. So I like to create like the building blocks of things, right?
Yeah.
And kind of parse them down into like what are truly the fundamental pieces, what are the moving pieces inside of each of those. So the book is about the second part of this, which is leadership. The first part, I don't think we address really I'm hesitating because we did 3 drafts. I think in the second draft of the book, we talked about
more
product.
Yep.
Yeah, but we did not in the final release of it.
Got it. Okay. So let's start with product then. Give me a sense of what's in that, what's underneath that category.
Yeah. So inside of this category, there's 3 different things. It's REM, like the band in the 80s. And that stands for results, experience, and marketing. So breaking each of those down, the first one is the results. And it literally is just like, how well does the company solve the problem? Does your iPhone do what you want it to do? Does your gym make you fitter? Does your financial advisor make you wealthier, right? Does the company, does the organizations, does the companies, does the business follow through on the promise? Do they solve something for the end user? Like that, again, just kind of pull back again. What are we doing here? The things that business success hinges upon. Like if you don't have that, you can do it another way, but it's going to be short-lived, right? There are fads. There are people that just hit like the right niche at the right time that just do this thing, but they're not going to create long-term sustainable success. The Amazons, the Apples are doing this well, right? The iPhone works really well. Amazon delivers things cheaply with great diversity of product choice quickly. That's what they do. Yep. So part of this, I guess, is like, I like the Jeff Bezos thing of, everyone applauds Bezos for how forward thinking he is, how much of a visionary he is, how much he's transformed the way businesses do business. And his thing is been from day one is what are the things that are not going to change in business? He's like, people are always going to want one of 3 things. They're always going to want more choices. They're always going to want cheaper products, and they're always going to want them faster. So it's hard to do those things in brick and mortar.
Right.
So that's why he created Amazon. He purposely started with books because he could do that. Books were all relatively the same size, shipped very easy. They didn't break along the way. The shelf life was forever. It was like there's them. And there's right. It's just so easy to start there. So so that's the first piece is results. Is the company solving the problem for the end user? And that's where most businesses start, right? They should go like, are we making someone's life better in some way, form, shape? Whether it's a better way to recycle or it's whiter teeth. Like, it doesn't matter. The next one's experience. And this is regardless of if it's a service or a product business, but it's the customer journey. It's the connection that somebody has with the company. It's the care and attention that they get. It includes everything from customer service to the way that people build a tribe, the vibe that the company creates. It's how the company treats you. And, you could love the iPhone, but if you have trouble with it and you call up customer service and they treat you horribly, or, after staying on wait for 6 hours, they say, sorry, we're not around to take your call. And you're like, what? I just wasted 6 hours on hold. Like, this matters as well. It matters more for service-oriented businesses. Obviously, if you're a restaurant, how you're treated at the restaurant is huge. If you go to Disney World, the experience is huge. If you are painting people's houses, the way that you treat that whole experience for them is huge. But I don't want to leave it at just service businesses, even though it also works really well for product businesses because you have to map out the customer journey. And at every touch point along the journey, meaning from when they find the website to when they start checking you out more on social media, to when they try your product, to when they buy it, and all those things, are they getting touch points along the way that make them feel really good? So the experience matters a lot. And the third part about product is marketing. This is the branding. It is the awareness. It is the marketing funnel. It's the 4 P's of marketing. It's the promotion, price, placement, packaging. It includes everything from, if you're a gym, it's your facility. It's the website. It's the imagery you use. It's what does the company make you think about them? And this, I kind of just alluded to it a little bit, but the traditional marketing thing is the marketing funnel. And, it's like 101 marketing is the biggest part of the funnel. The widest part is called awareness, and big marketing efforts go into creating greater awareness, which is, from digital advertising to get on TV to people advertise on podcasts, but it's basically like advertising to strangers. Then from there, people consider buying from you. That's the consideration people, and that's a narrower part of the funnel. And finally, they buy from you. And that's the purchase, and then hopefully they create greater awareness, and the funnel gets bigger and bigger. I'm blanking on his name. Duct tape marketing. What's his name? I can't remember. Blanking on that right now.
Don't remember either. But
I have Reid Hoffman in my head. I know it's not.
Mark.
That's crazy.
Is it Mark?
Yeah, it'll come to me. Anyway,
Okay.
I believe he's the guy that at least popularized, if he didn't invent, the marketing hourglass. Are you familiar with the marketing hourglass?
You've talked to me about it, but I haven't dived too much into it.
So really quickly, this is to me is like marketing. This is the way marketing should be done. It's the top. So instead of a funnel, which gets narrower and narrower, it's an hourglass, which gets narrow at the waist, but then it gets bigger again. And the hourglass, instead of the levels of the funnel being awareness, consideration, and purchase, the levels of the hourglass, the top ones are know, like, trust, try. Buy is at the narrowest part. And then after buy, it goes repeat and refer. So I like this because it fits into the way I think of marketing, which is the way, it's so funny, Patrick, episodes, probably 4 or 5 years ago, you asked me to define marketing and I didn't have an answer for it. So of course I sit and I think about it all the time, and I write notes on my phone and so now the way I define marketing is the process by which you turn a stranger into a raving fan. And to me, it's through these steps of the hourglass. So a stranger, you got to get to know you. That's a know. Then they can like you. Then they trust from you. Then they try it. Then they buy it. Then they repeat. And then they refer. If they refer, they're a raving fan. So to me, like the way that a company does their product well is the product delivers the results. It delivers an amazing customer experience. They just love the whole thing. It makes them feel alive. And that the marketing aspect is done really, really well. That's the product side of things.
Talk to me a little bit about the necessary iteration that you found to get to those things? Because everything you just like, yes, sign me up for that. But you and I both know that it is not a day one. Okay, let's get the product right. Good. Okay, cool. Let's figure out the marketing. And it's a process, to say the least. And so how do you suggest folks start to get to a place where they can say, okay, results check, experience check, marketing check? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? So the first part always starts with awareness. This is the awareness level. To me, it's like, okay, let's make sure we have these 3 pillars as the foundation of our product side of things. So from there, it's going to differ massively depending on, this is the thing that's a commonality across all businesses. Then inside the business is going to be a little bit different, right? If you have an app business or a SaaS business, it's going to look different than if you have a painting or a cleaning business, which is going to be different than if you are a personal trainer, which is going to be different than if you are, a car salesman. Like, they're all going to be a little bit different. But to me, it's understanding each of these processes and truly, like, it's asking yourself the question, are we solving the problem for the person in the best possible way? Can we continue to optimize and simplify? Mm-hmm. That's kind of a prism I always love to bring to any business.
Yep.
Can we optimize and simplify us even more? The customer experience. Have we mapped this out? Do we have a mapped out customer journey? Have we mapped out the first 30, 60, 90 days? Have we really mapped out what these touch points along the way look like? What are the pain points that they have? Like, when someone buys something, they go through a process called buyer's remorse, where they actually go home. So there's all these points along the way in terms of the psychological effects that happen when somebody is soliciting your business and buying from you. So understanding all of those things. And then the marketing, are we truly optimizing each part of the marketing hourglass? So for sure, this is not like okay, we're going to go listen to this podcast and on Monday, go back in and make it happen. It's a massive, massive endeavor but this is what it is. It's like the success of your business is reliant upon these things. And to me, that this exercise is, again, one in simplicity and framework, right? Because if you don't have this framework, you go in and you go, just urgent issue, urgent. So customer service was complaint. We have somebody sick from work. We're not making payroll. We lost 6 customers. Like, you're just dealing with all these urgent things. But what we need to do is not ignore the urgent things, but weigh them against the focus on the way to truly optimize the business.
Mm-hmm. Have you done yourself and realized it was maybe incorrect or not quite correct? Have you seen any other kind of broad categories like this, like results, experience, and marketing, where people do pay too much attention to maybe try to optimize, even though it's not the right thing to optimize? Are there things that you found or that you've done that aren't as powerful a lever as one of these 3 things, right? Again, it's the results, the experience, and the marketing.
Yeah. People think that their results of their business rely on getting external financing, right? We need to go raise capital. Like, we're not going to make it unless we raise capital. Well, I get it. To me, that's and then they celebrate when they get $1 million of funding.
Right.
And that's not business. You haven't made it. Business success is solving problems for the end users and make the end users feel like they're getting something more valuable in their lives. You getting funding does nothing for that. You haven't done anything. You're going to use the funding, hopefully, to help with these 3 things. Mm-hmm. So we get distracted by the other bright, shiny objects. And that's just one example.
Mm-hmm. One of the things when I work with folks, just on my own stuff, like it sounds really easy when you say, like, okay, solve the problem really well. We can all agree that that's the goal, but figuring out what the problem that you specifically or uniquely can solve is actually a harder thing to do than maybe people realize.
Right.
What does that look like? Maybe what does that look like for either CrossFit New England or CompTrain as it relates to, like, getting to the place where you're at now? was there a struggle to figure out, oh, that's not actually the problem. This is the problem. And now I can go chase that.
Yeah. Business owners get distracted by this all the time. They open up a restaurant and they think the problem that they're solving is feeding hungry people.
Right. Right.
That's not what you're doing when you open a restaurant. You are not feeding hungry people. Those people are making even a greater effort than they're delaying food to come to you. So it's a great, so when you really truly understand what it is that you're solving from, you're creating an experience for them. That's what you're trying to create a memory. You're trying to create an environment that they can't get at home. Mm-hmm. That's what you're trying to do with the restaurant. And it's the same thing with the gym. People go like, well, we're trying to get people fitter. That's the side effect of what we're really trying to do. The goal is not actually to get people fitter. They could do that at home. Again, they could just do it at home. You're trying to create something they can't get at home, which is make them feel like they're a part of something special. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. And now the way you do that is special to you and your gym. Is that a incredibly competitive environment that they just could not replicate in their garage? Is that world-class coaching that they wouldn't get otherwise, that they're just like enthralled from an entertainment standpoint of the coaches? Mm-hmm. Is it that they have the social connections? Is it that they just have a break from their everyday life? Like you understanding truly the problem that you're solving. None of these things are what they seem at first blush.
Yeah.
Like economics are not what they seem at first blush. Like supply and demand is a piece of it, but not necessarily. There are countless numbers of products that have increased in price, which by supply and demand should decrease demand that increase market share. Mm-hmm. Like premium products are a lot of times at a higher market share than lower products. That goes totally against supply and demand and economics 101. Mm-hmm. So you're just kind of like sitting there, with the business hat on, being like, this is the product we solve. This is what we're doing. You got to, think a few layers deeper than that would be my suggestion.
Yeah.
And this is where like creatives like you, like marketing departments do a great job of this, a much better job than operations. Operations come in and they execute. Finance comes in and crunches the numbers and runs the data. But the creatives and honestly, the best is the entrepreneurs themselves, right? Because they are the ones that they started this for a reason. They were trying to create something. And then a lot of times what happens is they know they're trying to create something, and usually it has to do with like this feel, this experience, but then they get distracted away from that by the economics, by the data, by the numbers, by all the things. And they lose this thing that they were originally trying to solve. And go back to like what was the reason you started saying in the first place? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so interesting. And I wasn't kidding when I don't know if I got it from you or if we're just similar in the looking for frameworks around these things. But one that I have that for myself and with folks I work with along these lines, and it's kind of what you're saying is what so often folks do is like they fall in love with an idea, like, okay, I'm going to go open a gym. And that's sort of where it begins and ends. And then they just try to go make the gym as good as they can. And that makes sense. Like you've got to start somewhere, and that's the logical place to start. But what happens is you make the thing so that you come up with the product or the service, and then you hope you get it right. And then you hope people like it. So you go from product to, oh, gosh, I hope this solves a problem, to I hope people find it so that I can solve that problem for them. And a better framework, I would argue, is to flip that entirely, is to say, not start with the product, but start with the people. Who are you actually trying to serve? Who are you trying to build this thing for? When you get a good sense of that, you can then say, okay, as it relates to me, as it relates to us, as it relates to our abilities, our skills, our interests, what is their problem that we can solve? Not every problem. We're not trying to make everybody healthy. But those people, the people who we've decided to build this thing for, what are their problems as it relates to the skills that we have, the problems that we can solve? And then from there, come up with the product. Not start with the product and then hope you find the people, but start with the people and then build to the product. And that to me is a better order of events, and often the inverse of what most people do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm thinking to myself, if I was a gym owner on the other end of that, I go, well, no, because my customers are people that want to get fit. And this is the experience I had when I started really trying to dive in, after 4 or 5 years trying to figure out and make my business a little more optimized. I did the thing, who's your client? Describe your client. And my answer was anybody that wants to get fit. Like, it's not socioeconomic. It's not geographic. It's not male, female. It's not any of those things. It's like, if you want to be fit, I want to be here. And then I realized that it wasn't that. It's true that all those things did not define my client, but my client was defined by certain character traits.
Psychographic.
And when I defined it by psychographics, that made a big difference, because that then defined the experience. Exactly. The next piece, right? That creates the experience. So in the early days, very intentionally, we just didn't know we were we were defining as very competitive. Like, if you didn't want to do the open, this probably wasn't the place for you. If you weren't a competitor, this probably wasn't the place for you. It was very, very competitive CrossFit England. And that led to certain experiences, like the open, like the way we trained our athletes, like the way we coached, like the way that they experienced the gym, leaderboards, and all the rest. So that defined.
I think about those big games. I wouldn't call them posters. They were too big for posters. But whatever those big signs were right in the entranceway.
Yeah, so what Patrick's alluding to is we had these big, massive banners of all the CrossFit Games athletes that I've ever trained. It said Becca Voigt, and there's a big, massive banner of Becca Voigt and Michelle Letendre, Chris Spieler, Matt Fraser, and all these there's about 20 games athletes that I've worked with up there. And it's like, this is who we are. And we were very intentional with who we are. And because of that, we attracted those people. So we have to get outside the normal scope of the way that businesses, economics would ask you to define your clients, because it's not necessarily just the way that they line up on a piece of paper. It's the way they think. Yep. And the way they think, I would argue, actually determines more about who they are as a person than anything else. And so to kind of complete the story, we've completely shifted away from that games. The banners are gone. So we're servicing a much different member right now. And because the experience is very different. Before, we did a month-long onboarding, 12 classes, because it was like, if you're not ready to hang when you come in here, bro, this might not be the place for you. Yep. Now you can try a free class on Thursday and then you jump into class. Yep. There's no elements at all. It's you jump right. Your first experience is experiencing the class, because we believe that class, without experiencing that, you haven't experienced it. So it shapes the whole experience once you're able to define who your member is.
Love that. Cool. I want to jump over to the leadership side of things, but is there anything left in that, or anything else?
No, I'm just going to fill that. I'm going to fill it in, because that's the blend between the marketing and experience. How you experience it, but then the marketing is that hourglass, right? So that we spoke to it. It's like, how do you create awareness? But then how do they try you? Try. So before, the way they tried us was you couldn't take a class. If you want to try us, they'd sign up for a month and take 12 classes. Now they try it very, very differently. And then once they buy and so on, it changes the whole thing.
Cool. Leadership. We definitely have talked about leadership, obviously, a lot. We talked about it relatively recently as the book was coming out, especially as it relates to this culture, vision, execution, which I know was part of the book. But where do you want to start talking about the other side of the coin here?
Yeah, so it's kind of basically as cool as what we just talked about is. And even though we were able to kind of pull it into a little bit more of the magic side of it, right? The unlogical side of it is like the way your people think. It's not just like find a market segment, dice it up to a niche market, target them with this set of it wasn't that mechanical. It was still kind of strategic a little bit, like this is how you do it. But we all know that your business is only going to be as good as your leadership. Like you can't Amazon's not going to be Amazon without Bezos and people like Bezos that he's brought in, the amazing people that he has. Elon, like the leadership, the visionary aspects to it, the way that they create culture. The saying is, culture eats Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the other side of this. I think there's two sides of the coin. One is your product, which involves marketing as well. We actually, in our business, marketing and product are led by the same team. Mm-hmm. So that just furthers the point. And the other side of that coin, though, is leadership. And that is how you create the culture inside of the business. A toxic culture will erode the foundation that everything else is built upon. And the opposite is true. A really solid culture will create a foundation that no matter how rocky it gets up above, it's a foundation that everything can rest upon. Mm-hmm. Then the next piece of that, kind of going through these really quickly, is the vision. Obviously, this is kind of caught the last 10 years. This word has kind of exploded with visionaries in the 21st century, like Elon Musk and Bezos and Steve Jobs and stuff like that. But it doesn't have to be this put a dent in the universe type thing to be a visionary. A visionary is somebody that can see something and then get people excited about it. Mm-hmm. And the last piece is execution, because as much as we've talked about all these other 5 pieces, none of it matters anything because it's all theoretical until you actually put action to it. And that's where the execution happens. And this is where holding people to standards, accountability, actually getting stuff done. That's where all of that comes to play. It's where truly like growth and betterment happens.
Mm-hmm. And so much of it is like, so much of it of what you just talked about, the culture, vision, execution, so much of that feeds into the product side of things, right? It's
absolutely. This is the foundation that everything else can be built upon.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah. So so here's the thing. It's like, once we start talking about this, it's like, it gets really great. People would rather talk about how to really do targeted, segmented digital advertising, because like that's going to have an immediate return on my ROI. I can see my, everything flows down to where it actually creates greater profit. And this seems like it's fuzzy, but it's not. I can't emphasize this enough that it's not. This is the hard stuff. And I mean that in both ways. It's hard skills and hard to do.
Yeah.
But when you do this well, everything else actually kind of falls into place a lot quicker. We talk about this in the book a little bit, where if you don't have a strong culture, it's essentially like putting a tax on every single decision, interaction, every single point of the business has taxes on it. It's just like everything's harder. Costs more. It takes more time. Whereas if you get this part right, it's more like a benefit. It's like lighter fluid. It's just like it goes so much faster and smoother. So the culture part, it's not, so it's like, this is coming in vogue and people are catching on to this, with people like Gary Vee and other stuff, but culture is not about ping pong tables, foosball, or having kombucha on tap for free in your place. It has very little to do with any of that stuff. Culture is about, do people feel comfortable sharing their ideas? Mm-hmm. It's about, is there transparency in the organization? People understand. Do people feel like they're a part of something? It's a sense of belonging to something, that they have impact in this thing. That's what culture is. And it's really hard to do. It takes a massive amount of intention, because everybody wants culture and everybody thinks that they just can as long as we put up like some good core values on the wall and we talk to people about it in meetings, that it's going to happen. And that's not the case. I've seen this on both ways. I've seen it happen really good and I've seen it happen really poorly. And it takes an incredible amount of intention every single day. Every single hour, you have to be thinking about creating culture and running through everything through the filter system of, is this going to improve what we're trying to create as a team? And we need to take things like values, which I just call like agreed upon things that you think are important. Mm-hmm. Like values has gotten so watered down now that I hate the word core values. Like, let's call it something different. let's call it things we agree upon that are important. Like that's what it is. And if you're going to find somebody that you want to date and potentially marry, isn't it kind of important that you find people that you find common ground on what you find important? Like you want to have kids. This person you're dating absolutely does not. That's not a right or a wrong thing, but the things that you find important are going to clash, and you guys are not going to be successful executing in creating the product of your family because of that one difference in, quote, a big air quotes, core values. So what we need to do is not put the core values up on a poster, on a coffee mug, or on a t-shirt, but bring them to life in your organization by operationalizing them. Every facet, everything that has to do with people has to be run through the filter system of your value set. You say that this is what is important to us. Up to you. It could be competitiveness or it could be cooperation. It could be profit or it could be charity. It doesn't matter what it is, but you have to know what they are. And then what happens is you attract like-minded people, not in the terms of like group think, the opposite of that. You agree with the people that say like, this is what is important to me on this baseline level. And now because of that, we can have really passionate debate about these little things inside the business. And that's how it works. But if you have clashing values, you don't get to have the open debate because you don't get to go anywhere. If you and your spouse don't agree upon, you want kids, she doesn't, you end up having kids, then you go like, how should we raise them? Should we try to do family dinners? It doesn't matter at that point. You guys have missed it. You can't even have those debates because every time you have a debate, you're like, this isn't what I wanted. So the culture thing, you have to operate every single thing to do with your people, from the way you hire them, to the way you fire them, to the way we reward and review the people. Everything has to be built through the shared value set of like, this is what we agree is important. So that's one way amongst many that you can kind of like bring culture to life and do it intentionally. The other part is like, every time that you have a mission, you have a purpose, you have a passion, whatever you want to call that thing. Like when you're making decisions, tie things back to that so people understand that this is what we're chasing. This is what we're doing. It doesn't look like you're like just bouncing from thing to thing to thing. But if you always tie it back to that original shared thing that people got on board on with, because this is something I find of super passionate. I feel like there's a reason behind the 9 to 5. I'm not just coming here and punching a clock. I'm so passionate, a shared set of shared purpose that we all agree to. If that is constantly brought to light, it just brings so much more in terms of what we're trying to do here. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also worth mentioning, or kind of embedded in that, is when you have that vision, when you have those values, the way I always, it's not a sexy term, but I always use decisional filters instead of values, because that's at least more practical.
Love it.
Like, well, what's the point of having a value? It's so that you can make more consistent decisions over a longer period of time. And one of the things you just said is that idea of like, oh, it feels like we're bouncing around to this thing and to that thing. Usually that happens because you don't have any decisional filters. You don't have a good reason to say, or a good method by which you say, okay, this option or that option, this one, I guess, because like, like, and I've been there before, you do that long enough and 2 years into it, if you're lucky to get 2 years into it, you look at, how did we get here? Well, it's because at every moment or every opportunity that you had to make a big decision, you didn't have anything to rely on except like, well, how did you feel that day? Right? Like, did you get enough sleep? Were you grumpy? Did you eat well? Like, okay, no. So you probably made a poor decision or whatever, a less intentional decision. And so just having all of these things, we talk about intention all the time. But just having that allows you to make not rational, but consistent decisions. And if you can make consistent decisions, you've said that before, a lot of times, which is that most people want to be part of or take part in a consistent business than an inconsistent one that feels perfect, right? And so wherever and however you can default to some kind of consistent decision making, which, as you've said, goes back down to values, goes back down to the culture. I think that's what people don't understand about the values or figuring out values or figuring out decisional filters. Like, well, why? Because like you said, oh, this soft, like whatever, we're just going to make a really good product and work real hard. That's just not how it works. You've got too many decisions ahead of you to figure out, to just rely on like, we're just going to work real hard.
Yes. Love that, decision filters. The business is going to operate at the speed of trust. That's what we talk about in the book. So trust is another like eye roll type word, just like core values. People go, oh my God, we're going to talk about trust and other stuff. But when you break down what trust is showing that you care, being consistent with that, and showing a certain level of expertise or competence. So it's the 3 C's of trust, right? It's care, hey, here we go, more acronyms.
There you go. Not messing around.
Alliterations. Yeah.
Yeah. Alliteration. Yep.
Yeah. Care, consistency, and competence.
Yep.
So what you're saying there is if you have these decision filters, it can keep you consistent because you're not going to be blown by the wind of your mood of that day or the changing market forces or what your competitor has done or an employee is leaving or an employee brings this new, great, amazing new idea to you. Well, let's bring it through the filter system. And your values are one of them. Your purpose, your mission, your big, hairy, audacious goal, your 3-year picture, your 1-year goals, all of these things you set up. This is the next part. This is the vision. Good segue. This is all the things that you're going to use to run through this filter system. And as scary as it is what that competitor might have done and launched, that like, oh my God, we have to respond to this. Well, run it through the decision filter. Like it might just be the nerves getting to you right now. It might just be that you're scared. When if you kind of like stick to your guns a little bit and you're not chasing the either bright, shiny objects or trying to avoid the brick that you think is being thrown at your face from the competitor, you can just kind of continue to go through this and you can show both to your organization and your customers that you care, that you're consistent, and that you have a certain level of competence. That breeds trust. Trust is what the whole business operates on.
Third one there is execution. I'm sure we could talk about that for 7 hours, but what are the high level thoughts there on as you said, like all this other, we get the other 5 things right. You fail on execution, you fail. Yeah. What are the big tentpole ideas worth talking about as it relates to execution?
So execution is basically how you, manage /lead /coach people, right? It's basically like, are things getting done? Are things getting done up to the standards? Are we pushing the boundaries of excellence? So in order for that to happen, there's varying degrees of approaches from complete autonomy. And if you read things like Daniel Pink, in Drive, you'll hear that that's the way to go. Then there's complete discipline, right? And micromanaging, like if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. But if you can't do it yourself, you got to make sure that these people and check the box all along the way. And there's this big, massive gap in between this complete autonomy and micromanaging.
Yep.
And that's really where we want it's the blend of the two, essentially. We want to be able to make sure we're paying attention, leading, coaching, managing people so that things are getting done not only well, but phenomenally well. But we also want to give people bigger, higher levels of autonomy. And that essentially comes down to the art of coaching, right? This is what coaching is. Coaching is exactly what we're trying to do here. It's empowering people to want to do the great job on their own, but you holding them to a standard that they might not otherwise set for themselves. That's what execution is. It's how you can bring a coach to the table to improve performance. And that goes everything into the way, in terms of the way you deliver feedback, whether it's the timeliness of that feedback, whether it's in front of other people or not. It's like there's so many different factors that come into whether you should tell the person right when they make the mistake, or you should actually watch the person make the mistake 5, 6, 7 times. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's stuff that takes some people are naturally inclined to be good coaches, and they just get this from an emotional intelligence standpoint because they can read people really well. But then there's other people that have to learn it the hard way and figure out kind of what the mechanisms are that create receptive students.
Yeah. There's a really good distinction. I read it in, or came across it in a book called The Coaching Habit. But it's a really worthwhile distinction, because once you recognize it, you can at least figure out, am I over-indexing towards one when I need to be the other, or vice versa? And the distinction is between coaching for performance and coaching for development. Performance is okay, let's figure out how to do this job a little bit better, whatever that thing is, whatever the mechanics are, whatever the tactics are. And coaching for development is obviously taking 3 steps back and say, okay, why do we keep having this issue, or what is the issue? Let's talk. Like, I'm going to help you figure out how to do this yourself, so that the next time a challenge like this comes up, you don't have to come to me for answers, right? And so recognizing that there's obviously benefits to both of them, but recognizing that we often default to coach for performance. Oh, they're coming to me with a problem. I'm the boss. I started this thing. I'm in charge. I need to then solve it. But that's probably going to lead to them coming back to you the next time they have a problem and a challenge, because you're the person who fixes things, versus I'm going to teach you, I'm going to coach you, I'm going to go slower so that you actually recognize the degree of autonomy that I want to give you, right? Whatever that thing is, versus, well, I'm going to micromanage because everybody keeps bringing me the problems. And I guess I've got so many problems, I just got to solve them, right? And recognizing that oftentimes, and this leads to maybe the next question, the kind of the big question, but like oftentimes, if we want to do this thing for a long time, you can't fix all the problems all the time. You can only empower your people to fix the problems together, or for themselves, or for you, right? And so I just think that distinction is really worth recognizing.
Yeah, I love that. That's like the give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach him how to fish. Yeah, exactly. And you alluded to exactly the breaking point for entrepreneurs, which is, I can do this. I'm a personal trainer. I can create a great relationship and a great results and a great customer experience for the one-on-one clients that I work with. But then my business gets big and I hire on another person and another person and another person. And now you're in the job of managing that person. And to your point, like, yes, you could just call up the customer that's having a problem with and be like, hey, sorry about that. Like, and you can solve it for them. And that solves it for them that moment. Or so like someone's not getting results. So, let me fix the programming, and I can fix the programming. Here's what it is. Their macros were off. Let me just fix that. And now they should be eating, 86 grams of fat, not whatever. So it's the longer road to work with the teach them how to fish thing. There's another level to it as well, which is working with, and I like that the performance versus development, because it kind of alludes to the same thing, which is if somebody is, it's the same way, and I got this from the way I work with my athletes. If somebody is missing a point of performance, if I'm a basketball coach and we're kind of doing pick and roll defense and somebody slides to the wrong spot, I'm not going to wait for 4 or 5 days before I have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Right away, I'm going to stop practice and go, whoa. Whoa. No. When he goes here, you slide here. That's the same type of thing that we want to do for hard skills with our employees. If they are tasked with writing a piece of copy, marketing material, whatever it might be, and they use a tonality or a word. You're working with a coach, and they when they are coaching with them, they miss a point of performance in the snatch progression. Yep. Right? I'm not going to wait a week to go, hey, remember last Thursday when you were coaching the snatch? You missed the progression where, in position 2, you talked about X and we want it to be Y. I want to do that as close to that moment as I can. Now, I'm not going to stop the class for it like I would have practiced in basketball, but right after that class, I want to have that conversation. And I do all the time. But if it's a more developmental thing, meaning more soft skill, meaning more if it's a personality related thing, meaning it's the tonality they have at which they address the class, meaning it's a body language thing, meaning it's they have a shrilly voice, meaning that it's one of these softer type things, that they don't look people in the eye when they talk to them. If I give them feedback on that right when it happens or as close as I can, it's going to look like I'm jumping down their throat and they are not going to trust me. I need, in that case, to create a resume of those infractions. And then I could go to them 6 days later and go, hey, Patrick, just a heads up. I've been watching you coach your class over the last 6 days. Common trend I'm seeing is that when you coach your class, you actually don't really look people in the eye. You just stare at the back whiteboard. It'd be really helpful if you went kind of eye contact, pull back to the whole group, find somebody next eye contact person, pull back up, find the whole group, and eye contact stuff. That works if I say, I've seen this after watching you do 5 or 6 classes. If I give that to you after the first one, you're like, dude, like back off. Like, what are you? It's too personal.
Yeah.
So this is like the developmental soft versus the performance hard skill in terms of the timing aspect that you deliver feedback and coaching.
Love that. Okay. Was there something else?
Nope, that's good.
Cool. So I want to start wrapping this up. One of the commonalities, I think, of a lot of the stuff that we just talked about is making a distinction between success and long-term success. Right. When we first went into 2 elements of every successful business. And I actually think a lot of what you're talking about is actually the success of a long-term success of a business. And so I say that to just ask the question, which is one of the challenges of all of us trying to do this thing, trying to figure out the product, trying to figure out the leadership, is it not, in the same way that a lot of people don't do it with their own personal health, not recognizing that we're aiming for the appropriate, but aiming for a low trajectory towards that distant horizon. Again, especially in this context, business, we're just racing too fast. We're just trying to do too much too fast. And in that pursuit, we're breaking things or we're coming close or too close to breaking things.
Yeah, I actually, I think that we should all be having a different conversation about business. The race, obviously, people that listen to this podcast are going to resonate with this and understand it. I believe that every single person deserves an opportunity to live a fulfilled life. I also believe that if you're in an organization that is racing, there's a level of chaos to that.
Yeah.
And that level of chaos is eroding people from the inside out. I believe that a slower approach with sustainability, and don't misread this. That means profitability, because lack of profitability is what creates chaos in the biggest sense. Because now you have an immediate and urgent problem that you need to solve, and if you don't solve it, you're gone. It's the death of your business.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you get obsessed with solving your problem, and you stop focusing on back to the product.
Yes,
you stop focusing on their problem and how you can solve it for them.
I just believe that as a total approach, this is my approach to leadership, that you can create a calm organization, and through that calm organization, the obsessiveness with returning next year's quarterly numbers. Now, again, I am all for profit, and the more profit, the more sustainability, the more calmness. So don't misinterpret my words here of saying like, I don't want you to make money or anything like that. I want you to do it sustainably.
Yeah.
And I want you to do it the right way by building the culture first. It literally has to go, we presented it in a different order, but it has to go culture first. It basically goes culture, vision, and then you execute on the product. That's how it actually goes. The execution is the results, experience, and marketing. That's what you're actually creating. Now, obviously, we want to do this. I'm not omitting financial responsibility. I'm not omitting financial modeling. That stuff is incredibly valuable, but it's not the thing that's going to create the long-term success. You can't ignore it because you need to be sustainable. You need to be profitable. You need to run your business responsibly. If you don't pay attention to that, you go, let's hire the next person, and your payroll goes out of whack. And now I'm speaking from experience. Back in the day when I didn't pay any attention to financial metrics when I was a young entrepreneur, and it was just like, best hour of their day or die. Great. If we got a chance to bring an awesome person on the bus, let's get them on the bus. We'll figure out the right seat. But gosh darn it, like I love these guys, let's hire them. And then you find yourself in a rough spot. That's not the way for true long-term success. And anybody that's been listening to the podcast, I think inherently knows that. I'm glad you brought it to light, but the way we define success is, it's kind of that Simon Sinek thing of like the finite. It's not who's winning next quarter. It's not who's winning next year. It's not, because then how do you define winning? Is it market share? Is it profit? Is it number of customers? Is it results that your customers are getting? Is it growth? Is it number of employees? Is it like, there's so many different factors that your scoreboard doesn't look like their scoreboard. So I do like that idea of the infinite game, the long-term thing, which is when you do that, it creates for a little more calmness in the organization. The urgency goes down a little bit. Not that we don't want to do things well and do things right and do things quickly. You just don't have to do them artificially based off arbitrary metrics, data, or deadlines.
Love that. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Ben. That was fun. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Thank you for your ratings and your reviews. Ben and I will be back next week for another episode of Chasing Excellence. You can get every episode of Chasing Excellence wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Until next time, thank you for listening.